Today, we're going to be talking about data management, risk management, but specifically how to master data mapping for effective risk management and how to navigate the path to enhance security and compliance. I am joined by Liz Benegas, who is the expert legal counsel here at Torii. Liz has guided companies like Memfault and Torii through legal, compliance, and risk management challenges from early stage growth to IPO readiness.
Thank you, John. Thanks for inviting me to do this. And thank you, audience, for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are located. So as John indicated, we're going to talk a little bit about data management today. In recent years, focus on data has increased exponentially. Thanks to remote work, increasing interoperability of tools and devices, technologies such as AI, and new privacy and security regulations, the proliferation of data breaches in the headlines. All of these things have forced data management to become a necessary part of our jobs. Data management is complex, requires not only time and effort, but also a really thorough understanding of the data that your company holds and the ability to forecast changes and risks to your data. So we're going to start off here today by talking a little bit about what data management is and whether your potential risks to your data, what can put your data at risks. So some of the risks associated with poor data management can be giving your data to third parties that misuse it. For example, parties that sell or transfer it to other persons or entities, or to third parties that suffer a breach due to lacking security controls. Another risk can be using too many tools, which is so easy to do, especially in this age of remote work. The more tools your company uses, the more third parties have your data. This can also create data silos that hamper your ability to work cross-functionally. 3, I'm going to go with not knowing what applications your employees use. This builds on to number 2 in a lot of ways. And also, I think remote work plays a big role here. But what we see a lot in our business is that a lot of companies don't know what applications they are using, or they don't know what their employees are doing with those applications. Primarily what kinds of data they're transferring to those applications. This happens a lot with free or low cost applications where employees will just sign up online to use something that is low cost, no cost. They figure it's not worth the time to put it through the procurement process. And they start transferring data, which may be personal data, it may be customer data. And that can make it difficult or impossible for your company to accurately manage where its data is going. So the actual risks of poorly managing your data, data loss or mismanagement can lead to harms, including lawsuits and regulatory investigations. You've probably heard of GDPR and the frightfully large fines that can come along with violation of that particular regulation. This is especially true if data includes personal information, health information, or financial information, because those types of data are regulated. Poor data management can also lead to reputational and monetary harms, including fines, but also customer retention or lack thereof, if customers don't have a lot of trust in your processes and the way you are handling their data. John, I think we can move on. All right. So data management. Data management in a word is knowing what data your company handles and having a plan for managing it throughout its entire life cycle. So this would be knowing where your data comes from, knowing who within your company and outside your company uses and or has access to that data. And I suggest that the best place to start your data management efforts is with a data map. What is a data map? So if you Google this, you will see a lot of articles and blogs and so forth identifying a data map as a construct of GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation that went into effect in Europe in 2018. However, I think a data map can be an even broader tool that goes well beyond personal data. So a data map, in my view, is a process that identifies and documents data flows within your organization. The idea behind a data map is that it enables your organization to identify all of the data you process so you can find it, use it, and protect it. Because a data map is the closest you can see or closest you can get to seeing all of your data in one place. It's a very valuable tool for understanding your data landscape. Right. So as Tories general counsel, my main interest in data mapping is from a security and privacy viewpoint. But it's important to note that that data mapping can also help your company identify areas for improvement and even revenue growth. So data is a very, very valuable resource, which is why many third parties want to get their hands on your data. So it's important to note that data mapping isn't only protective, but can also actually help your company with its growth and scaling efforts. So the benefits to data mapping are so many. In the short term, identifying the tools you use to process data can uncover duplicate and unused applications, which can lead to immediate cost savings. And this is something that we see a ton at Torii, and which our customers are always amazed by. But is a very tangible ROI when you are selling a data mapping project. A data map will also give you insight into potential security and privacy risks affecting your data. For example, one of the most important things I do in my data maps is to identify which vendors qualify as a sub-processor under GDPR, so I know that those vendors will require different standards than some other vendors. The greatest benefit to data mapping, though, far and away, is the transparency it gives your company. This transparency is required under a lot of regulations and seems to be clearly the direction that the privacy and security regulations worldwide are evolving. But also, as I mentioned, super important for your own company to know what data that you have and how you can use it, as well as how you cannot. The longer term benefits to a well-done data map can include helping your company manage your data lifecycle and proactively manage risk. A well-crafted data map is also a great opportunity to establish yourself as an expert on your company's data resources and how they can help your company meet its goals and avoid potential risks. The biggest benefit of a data map long-term, though, is the ability to use it as a tool in maintaining compliance with various regulations like GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, all of which require companies to know their data and to be able to trace its origin and its movements, as well as commitments your company may make to customers or consumers. Compliance with regulation, company policies, and contracts, obligations your company makes to its customers. So understanding and prioritizing the types of risks associated with each category of data you hold, refining security and privacy policies to appropriately deal with the priority of data that you've assigned. Those are super important things that come out of your data map. And we are going to take a few minutes here to walk through how you build a data map.
I'm gonna jump in real quick, and I'm actually gonna jump ahead. I'm sure a lot of people right now are saying it's a lot of benefits, but they may actually be curious, what does this actually look like? And so I actually want to just show this. This is a quick peek at what we're going to actually be sending out to people afterwards. But we've gone through a lot of benefits. We've talked a lot about the risks that you're preventing, but I also want people to see how accessible this is. It's not it's a time consuming, and it's a process that'll take effort and commitment, but it's also something that you can get started with right away. So I just wanted to insert this before we jump into how to actually build this so that people have an idea of what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry
Awesome.
for interrupting. Just jump.
No, not at all. I'm happy to hear someone besides myself talk. That's great, John. Thank you for giving us a sneak peek at that. So we've covered the why. Now let's talk about the how. How do we create a data map? First, it's important to understand that a data map is a living document. And it's one that has to be updated regularly to be useful to your company. Second, as you probably guessed, and as John alluded a couple moments ago, creating this document is a pretty intense process. And it requires resources, mainly time. In this instance, maybe your time. Third, a data map is specific to your organization, and you have the freedom to create it in a way that best serves the needs of your company and the data you process. All of this might mean that you start small with your data map and grow it over time. So the data map that John just showed and the data map that we will send to you after this presentation, it's fairly basic, right? It's an Excel spreadsheet. I designed it to be, as John alluded, accessible, easy to update, and hopefully it grows over time. So we're going to break down the process into 5 steps here. First, figure out where you want to put the data you're compiling. Because I talked about starting small, we have put ours in an Excel spreadsheet for now, but you could also use a diagram. You could use an application that is purpose-built for data mapping or for diagramming, if that's how you prefer to see this. Next, you're going to need a list of the types of data your company handles and the sources of that data. This might be confidential information, customer data, employee information, health information, etc. You also want to track where you transfer your data, including the applications you use to process that data. I like to get this data from multiple sources, and I'm talking about the places where your data goes. My number one, selfishly, is the Torii service because it's the most comprehensive and it gives me not only the applications that are sanctioned by Torii for use, but also the shadow IT apps, which can be those things that we talked about earlier that your remote employees may subscribe for or download on their desktops at home that you don't necessarily know about. But I do also cross-reference other sources like lists of payables from the finance team and key apps that are listed in our SOC 2 report to be sure that I'm getting the whole universe of applications. So number 2, once I have that big long list, and it is a long list, I meet with internal stakeholders to discuss each type of data and each application. So this part is the biggest lift, and frankly, it can be rather tedious, but it's also where you gather the most information. For example, this is where I typically uncover applications that are no longer used and can be discontinued for cost savings. I also typically find duplicate apps in this step, like each team is using its own project management tool, for example, and we can consolidate our whole company into one instead of having 4. An important part of this step is to talk to stakeholders about how they're using applications and with what types of data, including other tools that may integrate with the application and receive data from it. One of the primary tenets of privacy and security law is minimization, meaning that you are not receiving and you're not transferring more data than you actually need for the purpose. And so making sure that you're not holding on to too much data, that you're not sending it to other places, is a really important part of this step. So number 3, you're going to take all of this data you have so far and analyze it. This is where I would identify applications that are sub-processors or applications that are particularly high risk and therefore may require additional investigation. For example, higher risk tools, I will ensure we do additional due diligence around security and privacy measures. And for sub-processors, I will ensure that we have a DPA and the necessary data transfer mechanisms in place. that allow us to transfer data from the EU to other regions. Number 4, so you have the bulk of this data map. And what's next? You need to conduct your risk assessment, basically. Prioritizing your data and crafting policies to address your data management. Many companies place the highest priority on customer data, right? Because this is what we get paid to do: store and analyze and synthesize and otherwise process data on behalf of third parties. So you may choose to address that with more rigor than, say, your company's internal confidential information. This step, number 4, may be a combination of using existing policies that you have, perhaps your ISMS policies, and making specific updates there to address particular data management issues, and or creating new ones. Some of the policies I typically draft based on my data map are a data protection policy, retention and deletion policy, and a third-party risk management policy. Those types of policies encourage me to revisit my data map regularly. So I am making sure that we are complying by keeping the most accurate record of our data and how we're using it. And then last but not least, you start over again. The key to data mapping is maintaining accuracy so it can be a source of truth. And so for better or worse, that means that you are almost constantly in this data map, adding new applications as your company does, documenting new uses of data and or new types of data that your organization collects. And so it's an ongoing thing, a labor of love, if you will. John, you can flip to the
I was
next.
just going to say real quick in regards to the slide, we've done some recent internal research with Torii. We have our SaaS benchmarks report.
Yeah.
And just to give people an idea of the scale of what they're looking at with this and the importance of that continuous improvement, repeating that process.
Yeah.
Found that the average organization has about 600 applications in their organization.
Yep.
Now, a lot of those are, Jim from accounting tried out this new AI software for 25 minutes and then moved on to the next thing.
Right.
But even in those instances, you're introducing new technology, and especially with the prevalence of something like AI, you can be very easily feeding a lot of proprietary data, even customer data sometimes, but at the very least, it's really easy to, without thinking about it too much, put in some form of IP into one of these systems. And these are things that prior to having something like SaaS discovery, if you're a SaaS management platform, these things were totally invisible from an IT perspective. But with this new technology, they can actually see those things. And what you're offering here is a framework for actually addressing it in real time, so they can stay on top of it. And, the whole like ignorance is bliss, that doesn't really apply.
No longer applies, for sure.
Yeah.
For
so
sure.
Those days are over, but the exciting thing is that we have technology to deal with it, and you've got this framework here that makes it a lot more doable in the first place.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, selfishly, I use Torii to alert me whenever anybody in the organization adds a new tool. Because Torii has a browser extension, it can let me know even when somebody downloads something to their desktop. And so I have the opportunity to stop that before it gets too far, if it's not a sanctioned app. Or I can go to this individual and say, hey, why are we using it? What are we using it for? And get ahead of them, giving it a lot of data that we don't necessarily want to transfer. And I'll say, it's become really difficult in recent years with a lot of applications now using some form of AI. So you're not actually subscribing to a new application, you're just enabling a feature. But the thing with a lot of these AI features is that once you turn it on, it ingests a whole lot of data that you can't get back. So I suggest that is, that is kind of a weakness too, and something that we should also be including in our data maps, right? Not just that we're using this tool, but change management also, that we are now using this tool with an AI feature. making sure that we are clear what data is being ingested through that AI feature, and making sure that the party that is enabling that AI feature, be it the vendor or a third party application, isn't using it for training purposes and so forth.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I know I interrupted you, so
No, that's totally fine. Love the questions. So winning support for your data mapping projects. This is, a data map is such an important thing, but it can be a little bit of a difficult place to show ROI to the company. So first thing I do is create a business case. I highlight potential compliance with things like GDPR and HIPAA, and definitely cost savings opportunities, where we can eliminate applications or decrease our number of users. That is always a very powerful very powerful ROI for the company. As well as the importance of avoiding intangible harms like security breaches. As IT pros, you know the saying that nothing funds information security like a breach. But if we don't have to go there, we don't want to go there. And so this data map, this exercise can help us avoid some of those potential harms. Next step for me, once I have my business case in mind, is to engage key influencers and beneficiaries. This data map will have really broad application in your company. And so I like to look for cross-departmental champions and align outcomes with finance, procurement, security, and even executive leadership goals, so that a lot of people can see and have a stake in the outcome of this project. You can also use this as a highlight to excuse me. You can also highlight this data map as an opportunity for differentiation in your market sector. Not that the data map would be publicly available or even available to your customers, but it does give you a very unique view into what kinds of apps and data protection and security policies your org has in place that you can use vis-a-vis competitors, and or to establish yourself as a leader in privacy and security in your market sector. Clarifying each stakeholder's role to ensure accountability and engagement. This is a tough one. So it isn't right, really, for all of the work to fall on one team, say IT or privacy. This should be a living, breathing document that has input from across multiple teams. But it can be kind of hard to do, to get your stakeholders to check back in and document changed use cases. That's something that I will leave to you, but I will just tell you, it helps to start upfront, letting each person know what you expect from them on an ongoing basis. And then finally, once you've started, and maybe you've started small like I do, you showcase your quick wins, illustrate immediate cost savings, operational security wins, that can help your company get bought into the value of this process.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is our data mapping template. Like I said, if you Google this, you will find hundreds of these. I prefer to start with Excel because I learned through words and not visuals. But there you will find a lot of these online that are more visual kind of decision tree models. And so there are thousands of ways you can do it. The variables here will also depend on what your company tracks. For example, if you're in a regulated industry like health or finance, you may have different attributes to your data that are important for your company to track. But at a very basic level, this is the type of spreadsheet I start with as a data map, right? So I want to know, what is the source of my data? Where am I getting this? Is it directly from an employee or directly from a customer, or is it something I'm gathering from my website about a prospect, for example? Next for me, I think a lot in terms of applications that we transfer data to. This doesn't necessarily have to be an application. It can be anything. Any entity or person that receives your data. You want to document the types of data that are processed. This may be employee data, it may be confidential data, it may be customer data. It may just be metadata. Maybe it's nothing significant. That's fine too. You want to know what role is your company in vis-a-vis this data. Now, I've put here controller, which is a specific GDPR term that means we have responsibility for determining how that data is used. That tells me that we are responsible for telling a vendor how they can use our data. It also tells me that this person I'm transferring data to may be a processor or a sub-processor of my data. Next, really important to capture the purposes of processing and the types of data that are going into this application or being transferred to this third party. You also want to note in here who has access to this data, both within and outside of your company. And then something I do, because I like my data map to be as comprehensive as possible, is note where I can find their terms and their DPA, which again is a bit of a privacy construct, but will help you down the road when you're dealing with sub-processors or processors using employee data and things like that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Liz. I know we are right up against time. I think we'll do one quick question just because we got so many here. I want to get so for those of you who have submitted questions, we weren't able to get to them. We'll be sure to follow up with you after the webinar, answer some of those questions. But I'm seeing a lot here, questions around the intended users of the data map. So essentially you have this data map.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if there's talking mostly about maybe external parties that you might want to have this for, but who needs this data map at the end of the day besides yourself?
It's a great question, and I'm going to go with the standby lawyer answer. It depends. So for clarity, the data map is exclusively an internal document. This isn't something that you really share outside of your company. But within your company, I share mine pretty liberally. Like I said, I think it's important to have roles and responsibilities so it doesn't get messy and you don't have a lot of people in there, making random changes. But like I said, it's impossible for one person to accurately track 600 applications on their own. And so, more heads are better in terms of staying on top of what applications you're using, how you're using them, why you're using them, and whether you still need to be using them. So ideally, I think this document is used by multiple teams, including finance, procurement, legal, privacy, IT, products, all of whom can have their designated access to this document. And I think ideally it has one or maybe two departments that own it. A lot of times I see that as being IT and privacy or legal, however your internal structure works, that really own keeping this document up to date and live for all purposes.
Awesome. All right. Well, like I said, we're right up against time, but just wanted to thank you so much, Liz, for offering your expertise, for sharing your experience with building out this data management process through the use of a data